So there's a critic out there, a particular melon, that likes to argue with his audience, but he likes to keep it one-sided. So I figured I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna argue with Anthony Fantano without him being able to argue back. Okay? He has this take, okay? He says that these 3 Green Day records aren't really that bad. You know, uno, dos, tres. So he goes on to cope for like 5 minutes straight over how these records are actually not that bad, you know? So I thought today I'm gonna argue with this guy because you know what? These records are that bad. These records aren't that great. And yeah, they have some stuff earlier that was better, of course. But to say that these 3 records are a return to form after 21st Century Breakdown and American Idiot is really a ridiculous thing to think. And I think that that just means he's trying to push this narrative to get a little pushback. There's no way he actually thinks this. It can't be the things that actually goes on in his brain, all right? Because these records are awful. So we gotta go through all of his arguments, point by point, and I'm gonna point out to you where this man is just coping, okay? Where this man is just absolutely coming to conclusions to convince Green Day fans that his opinion on these 3 records is the real opinion on these 3 records. And I'm here to tell you that I'm not a Green Day purist, okay? And I actually hold a lot of the same opinions about their discography as the musical melon, okay? But these 3 records, I think he's deliberately trying to have a conversation in the comments, so to speak. So I'm not gonna have that conversation in the comments. That's ridiculous. I'm gonna create my own comment section to have this conversation in, okay? So let's talk about this trash fire in a little bit. First, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Dan Frampton. I am the internet's most ruthless gatekeeper. Thank you so much for kicking back with me here today. If you enjoy what you're seeing, how's about you like, comment, and subscribe? You can throw a couple pancakes down there in the comments, or join the channel if you're feeling saucy. Okay, without any further ado, alright, we got the melon over here. Gonna be talking about these 3 records. He's gonna cope. He's gonna mold. He's gonna seethe. He's gonna try to convince you that these records aren't that bad. All right, Melon, tell me about these 3 records, please.
Now, with how these records were received at the time,
yep,
and maybe this was the case within the paradigm and the time frame that they were put out, but still, you would think that not only was this like the lowest point the band could ever reach, but it was also like the lowest point that an American band of Green Day's size and influence could possibly reach. Like, these records are like the worst thing that you could possibly imagine Green Day putting out, which again, to me is interesting and hilarious considering that they had just put out fucking 21st Century Breakdown.
Okay, we have a lot to break down there, okay? So there's a reason why these 3 records are looked at that way. And I'm not gonna argue with him and say that they're not looked at that way. They are looked at that way. And that's because if any rock band just like pumped out over 30 tracks, separated the release date and just put a whatever cover on it, it would be seen as lazy. It would be seen as a cash grab. It would be seen as kind of the lowest common denominator that a band could do. The optics on that would be resting on their laurels. But because they just did 21st Century Breakdown and American Idiot, these operatic pop punk concept records, you know what I mean? This is going to be seen as a return to form. No. God, no. This isn't a return to form. I'm very familiar with what Green Day's doing here. They're trying to be kicking back, okay? But while they're kicking back, they're going to try to make a whole bunch of millions of dollars off it and try to cash in on some nostalgia.
Uno, dos, tres, obviously with it being, 3 albums back to back to back, over 30 tracks in total.
And here he is, just saying the quiet part loudly, and for some reason, not understanding that it means awful. He's saying, yeah, they put out records back to back to back. They just cranked out these songs back to back to back, but that's not that bad.
Yes, this project, this series of projects, it's excessive too in its own way.
And that's him acknowledging it and brushing it off, being like, yeah, so what? It's a little bit excessive. Yeah, the excess is a big part of the problem. It's a big reason why it sucks. You can't just be like, the excess, the tremendous amount of bloat, no big deal. It's ridiculous to cope.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of the material on these records collectively is not that bad. It's Green Day returning to form, going back to basics.
Cope. No, it is not. No, it is not. It is not any of those things, Melon.
Billy Joe and company making the extra effort to have the recordings sound, live to tape really did, I think, impact the way these tracks vibe and feel. It's kind of exciting. It's punchy. Yeah.
There's like maybe 3 or 4 punchy moments where the production actually adds to the punchiness of the record. That is Cope. That is just a critic talking about the production of a record because it's going to go over the heads of most people. So he's going to be like, yeah, so what? It was bloated as hell. Yeah, so what? The songs weren't really greatly written. They're not really the best songs in the world. But my God, did you hear that punch? Oh, they returned to form with some punch, did they, Melon? Is that why these records aren't that bad? Tell me more.
It may not be as raw as the Dookie era stuff.
And there he is just saying the quiet part loud again as if it's no big deal. On one hand, he's like, yeah, it's a return to form, but sure, it's not as raw as their return to form that I would be talking about in the same sentence. What the fuck?
The band isn't spending hours of wasted time trying to impress you with oh man, look at what we think about Ritalin and Jesus and suburbia. And
no, they're not wasting hours of time trying to do any of that mindless stuff. They're wasting even more than hours worth of time trying to convince you of other things. They have 5 songs just named girls' names. All right, there's one song called Amanda. There's one song called Amy. You know what I mean? This is none of the things that this guy is talking about. Because yes, I watched this video and then I had to endure these records myself because I knew I had to argue against them because these records really are that bad. 21st Century Breakdown really is that bad. American Idiot is bad. Warning is bad. They haven't done a lick of shit worth listening to since the 90s. So putting this up against other stuff that sucks incredible amounts of ass isn't really gonna prove any points out here, okay? You're like, hey, this tremendous pile of shit over here isn't really as stinky as this kind of other underwhelming pile of shit with less flies on it.
Look, I've seen people tear these records apart as oh man, they're not deep, they're not saying anything, blah, 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 blah.
That isn't the critique. It isn't about not being deep. It isn't about not saying anything. I love a good song that isn't deep, that isn't about saying anything. And a lot of the early stuff is introspective to the point where people are like, oh, that's so profound, but also so relatable. You know what I mean? But this thing over here, these Uno Dos Tre, it doesn't have any of that.
And it's that's what they were doing on their early shit. I would rather Billy Joe play.
It wasn't, buddy. What are you talking about? Did you even listen to the record? Yeah, sure, there is a lot of airheadedness that goes along with the first bunch of records or whatever. But like I said, that kind of introspection where they're telling you, oh, I did this thing because I'm kind of a bad person and I know I'm a bad person. You know what I mean? Kind of being honest with their character flaws and stuff like that. Kind of being a little bit philosophical, but also, yes, airhead stoners from California. Uno Dos Tre, they are decades past that, and they have many, many millions of dollars ever since that, okay? These guys are bona fide celebrities at this point.
Play to his strengths lyrically in the way that he does on these projects, then hear him try and miserably fail over and over and over to define American suffering, inequality, so on and so forth on 21st Century Goddamn Breakdown. Now,
yes, he failed at that and he failed at this. He was failing all the way across the board. I know Dookie has a lot of nostalgia, all right? Me, personally, I have a lot of love for Kerplunk and Insomniac as well, you know what I mean? A lot of love for Nimrod. Personally, Nimrod is my nostalgia. This is the record that I grew up with kind of record.
Now, look, with 30 plus tracks across all these records, are there some duds? Yes, of course there are. There are duds, there are silly tracks. The band...
There are more duds than there are quality tracks, okay? Far more duds. Way more silly moments. I think the silly moments he's talking about is the song called Makeout Party or whatever.
And obviously with all these songs, leaves a lot of room to make mistakes, and mistakes are certainly made. But
right, he's saying all the things. This is him acknowledging it, but being like, that's not really that bad when you look at 21st Century Breakdown and when you look at Father of All Motherfuckers.
There are way more catchy tracks on this thing than there are shit ones.
That's not true. I listened to all of this stuff. There are not that many catchy songs, all right? I counted 6 cool songs out of 30 songs, okay? That is a bad ratio for any project.
The performances, again, are pretty good, and they're not bloated with a bunch of useless extra instrumentation.
Yeah, sure, the songs aren't bloated with any extra instrumentation. It's the whole project that is bloated that is the problem. The exercise in lazy excess here is absolutely disgusting, especially when you juxtapose it with all that kind of like anti-consumerism American bullshit that they were doing before that. This is like the McDonald'sification of Green Day over here.
Where they're trying to convince you of like, oh man, we're so operatic, we're epic, we're like Queen, but punk, man. No, I would rather just listen to them do this because honestly, they're better at it. Now,
they are better at it, for sure, but it's all whack. It's all corny. Maybe they're about to do something that's cool in the next year or two. Who knows? But I can't say with any certainty that they're ever gonna do anything halfway listenable ever again.
Now, does that mean I love these albums front to back and that I would like, subject myself to listening to every single one of them?
He's saying it while laughing. He knows that these records are bad. He's absolutely giving it a scathing review, but the undertone is that it's not that bad. It's actually better than the stuff that they did before it and the stuff that they did after it. So this is actually not that bad, guys.
Collectively, no. But I think if you whittled the crap out of Uno, Dos, and Tre, and just pulled them all together into one record, all the best moments, you would have an album that at the very least is as good as Nimrod.
That is serious cope. You would have 6 songs, okay? And all these songs that I would keep, they're all mid, all right? They're not great songs. I'll never remember them the way that you'll remember all these iconic tracks off of Nimrod. All of these iconic tracks off of Dookie. This doesn't have any moments like that. Sure, they kind of dip into 60s rock. They dip into 50s rock. They do some weird kind of R&B type stuff on here. They sing about being in high school. They sing about all these girls and stuff like this. They're just songs for the sake of songs. There's nothing here. Empty calories, all right?
It's just hard to see it because the band gave you so much stuff all at once, and some of it isn't really good. And hearing so much Green Day in one year does kind of expose some things, at least, like the inherent lack of versatility in the pop punk genre. How
right, but it's not that bad. Everything's fine.
Repetitive some of the band's chord progressions or melodic ideas are.
Right, but that's no big deal. It's all good. No big deal. It's fine.
Now, certain things get tiresome when you're talking about extending them over 30 plus songs. But honestly, in terms of writing and performance, generally speaking,
tell me,
I don't think this was a bad era for Green Day. It just kind of seems bad because it's just too damn much. And if the band put more focus...
That's so funny. I love that line. I love that line so much. That is amazing. It's not bad. It just seems bad. Well, buddy.
Care into what they were doing across these 3 records. I think, they could have come out with one of their best albums, and the fans overall probably would have had a better response to all of it too.
Okay, so that was Anthony Fantano clearly coping and trying to rewrite Green Day history, okay? Very funny, very audacious. The hubris on this man is incalculable, all right? But I'm going to get out of here right now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please watch one of these other videos over here. See you later.